Hi, and welcome back. Today we are joined by our co-host, Craig Sendach, the owner of Touching Hearts at Home NYC, and his wonderful brother, Matt Sendach, who is a vice president at Lennox Advisors, also in NYC. Thank you for joining us today, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having
We're
us.
glad to be here. So Matt, last episode you talked a lot about individually owned insurance policies and some of the planning strategies that people should consider for their future, and especially as it relates to caregiving. So what are some of the things with the long-term care insurance policy that you may not have had a chance to mention that we were talking a little off air about?
Yeah, I think that all insurance, your insurability is a gift. So when you go out and apply for individual insurance, whether it be disability, life, or long-term care, insurance carriers are going to look at your pre-existing conditions, what medications you're taking, what family members might kind of had in the past, and it's an extensive kind of interview from them to see if they even want to insure you. So there's some adverse selection in terms of who carriers are willing to insure, especially on the long-term care front. So last episode we talked a little bit about how the market is shrinking. There's not as much carriers in the long-term care arena. So we find a big percentage of our clients who are actually just declined from long-term care insurance protections. It's very hard to get. So anything that is going to come up or anything that could affect your health, even from a life and a disability insurance perspective, the sooner you get started on planning, the better, because you never know what's going to happen. And that's a lot of what this show's about and a lot of what Lennox talks about with their clients on a daily basis. But you never know what's going to happen, and there are about a 1 in 4 chance that somebody has something during their working careers that's going to affect them from going to work on a consistent basis. And planning for the unknown is critical. Most people don't have enough savings, and when you are young and healthy is the time to do it. Typically, when people call us and say, "Hey, I'm interested in long-term care insurance or life insurance or disability insurance," typically it's too late. People are sometimes interested when something happens, and that's when the light bulb goes off, and they're like, "Oh, I should probably think about getting those type of protections." And too many times we find that it's too late, and I think planning now is very important in order to get the proper protection. If God forbid you got disabled or passed away too soon or had a long-term care situation.
So basically, a person should have long-term care as early in life as possible, because as you get older, health problems come up, right? So like if you're a parent, you should purchase life insurance and stuff for your child. Can you do that?
Is there a sequence of events in the
Yeah.
like is long-term care not which policy in the order? What would you do first?
So it's, everybody's in a different stage of planning, right? So there's not one size fits all. I think making sure that you're taken care of is always an important priority, right? So making sure that you have the proper protection. We do spend a lot of time with our clients. You asked a good question about purchasing insurance for their children. You can purchase life insurance for your children. And under the age of 18 with most carriers, they don't require you to go through that medical underwriting that you would typically have to if you're above 18. So locking into your insurability is certainly a good thing and a good strategy from a planning perspective if you have the resources to do it. You never want to sacrifice your own retirement and the own protection that you need to make for the next generation. So ensuring that it's structured appropriately as part of a financial plan would be our first priority. But if somebody did have extra resources and wanted to make sure that their child was set up, then the sooner you can do it, the better. I have clients who are just planners. People like to make sure that their family members are safe, and I think the more you can do now is very important.
I had a situation once where I met a person who was a not long-term care, life insurance policy selling person, salesperson, excuse me. And I met her on the Metro North, and she had a meeting with me at her office to talk about it. And I was in my early 20s, and honestly, I really didn't care about it right then. And so as I look back on it, youth is wasted on the young. I wish I had looked in on it before.
Yeah, we hear that often, and I think sometimes I think one of the things that Lennox does a great job is looking at everything holistically. So, if we are positioning products or services or investments or planning appropriately to the right person, then there might be 20-year-olds and that should be locking into their insurability who do have the resources to be able to get the different insurance programs in place. But it's really about spending the time with individuals, getting to know them, getting to know their goals, their objectives, what's important to them, what they think their future is going to look like, and really getting to know them so that way then we can give them really sound advice and put the proper program in place.
Now, a lot of our viewers in the Bronx who are, patients and caregivers who may be lower income, they have a lot of issues understanding Medicaid and Medicare. And it's an especially a problem for those who have a little bit of money and they want to qualify for those programs. So tell us about how do you get eligible?
I could talk from the home care standpoint and first just mention that when you talk about those health insurance coverages, Medicaid, Medicare, they're typically a depending on your asset and income level, a catch-all type health insurance offering, assuming that you no longer have a company offered plan through some of the other insurance carriers, okay, or you're at the age where you qualify for those products. Medicaid, generally speaking, is the lower income, lower asset level product. It's changing regularly, but generally speaking, if you have less than $14,500 in total assets, you qualify for Medicaid. And if you're using Medicaid to pay for your in-home care services, it's because you've determined that going on Medicaid is a good idea because the total needs and costs of everything that you would need to take care of yourself and do the activities of daily living in your home is far greater than and more important than whatever else you would have in terms of income, assets, and that you would be spending money on. It's the absolute needs in life. The challenge that you start to mention, though, is, and they're very well taken care of from a home care standpoint once that decision is made and it's determined it's the right financial move for the person. The challenge is Medicare is then everybody else. You could be above the limit, you could be middle class, you could be ultra wealthy, but it's everybody. So you have people who are just above the limit, or they feel as though they're comfortably above the limit, but $100,000 could go very quickly if you're talking about the needs at home, to start paying for the type of services that a home care service does for your daily needs. So that's very challenging. So with Medicare, there's a couple different parts, A, B, and C, and even with that, you find that those who've done a good job planning for their future, find that they don't really have many options. Medicare will cover a transition home for everybody who has this insurance from a facility. And essentially that's to prevent a readmission into the facility where the carrier is then going to have to pay more for you to be in insurance in the facility and being taken care of with all the medical stuff going on in a hospital or rehab center. And it typically will approve that person for a couple times a week for a couple hours at a time, but it expires after about a month or two, depending on the person. That's it. You've transitioned back to home life. And at that point, it's assumed that, when you were most vulnerable, you had the skilled professionals in the home to help take care of the things that you needed to get back to that home life. With Touching Hearts at Home, we're often the addition to those skilled professionals in the home who basically, the decision has been made by those family caregivers that more support is needed than the 3 hours for 3 times a week to help this person with everything non-medical in the home. That even just because they're living with a medical condition doesn't mean that they're able to do all the non-medical tasks, laundry, planning proper meals with their diets in mind, running errands, light housekeeping to promote good health. These are all things that And by the way, they might just be lonely. They're used to being very, very social. They're used to their active lifestyle and going to work. So having somebody come in and regularly be with them when their family may have other busy things going on are other things that a health insurance provider would never pay for. I mean, why should they? Historically speaking. Now, there is some change to that thinking because it is being recognized that, and this is part of the Medicare Advantage, Part C, as it's referred to.
A lot of caregivers don't understand the parts of Medicare.
It sounds confusing when
Yeah.
when you say Part C and there's different options, but it's just an optional part, and you really should look into before you start paying for that if you're already on Medicare. What relationships would that offer you with the different carriers in your state? Every state is different. So in New York, for example, I think it's moving a little slower. That Medicare Advantage portion will start to pay for some of these non-medical tests in the home. There'll be a limit, in terms of the hours, in terms of what gets approved, what doesn't, much like an individually owned long-term care insurance policy will offer. In order to be approved for that claim and have the ability to use the insurance is still to be determined and on a case-by-case basis. But it's a long way of saying you have health insurance. It's primarily there to take care of the absolute necessities. But when you have all these other things that could be preventive in nature or extra in terms of support that a person absolutely needs, usually you're on your own.